Okay, it's 1:35. We're going to get started. And so I'd like to welcome everybody to our home 2024 NOFA Native American Entities Program Activities Application Workshop webinar. And we'll advance it to the next slide, and we're going to hear a few comments from our leadership team.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're really excited to talk with you about the home program activities and the NOFA that we have out right now. I'm Janice Waddell. I'm the Assistant Deputy Director at HCD for the overseeing the HUD annual programs, and the home program is one of those programs. We wanted to start off today. Many of you may have seen some of the news reports about the president's statement and the OMB letter, that the Office of Management and Budget letter that came out today, pausing some federal payments. And so we just wanted to say right now we're reviewing that. We are working with our federal counterparts at HUD to get clarity on it. If anything comes up over the next few weeks that changes anything in the NOFA, we will absolutely communicate with you right away. But we think this is an exciting opportunity. We would love to work with tribes through the home program. So we're moving forward, and we anticipate things should clear up in the next few days. But as I said, if there's any updates, we'll communicate with you right away. And if we need to, we'll extend the date. Fortunately, this NOFA is open through the end of September for tribes, so that's good. That's a good thing. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Willa.
Thanks, Janice. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Willa Darley-Chapin. I'm the Housing Policy and Program Administration Branch Chief. It's a new branch within the federal housing programs. This branch will focus specifically on programs, so the home programs that we're discussing today, TBRA, first-time homebuyer, owner-occupied rehab, as well as a home ARP program, and policy as well, and financial management. So together with our efforts to develop new state home program guidelines, we are making a number of improvements for the home program to make sure that we can get things under contract and get disbursements made as quickly as possible. So I just really want to thank you for being here today. I'm going to be here for the rest of the webinar, listening in and available to help answer questions. But thanks again, and turn it over to Nikki.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Nikki McKay. I am the section chief for the home program currently, and I am here to support the team as they make this presentation as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I'd like to introduce the Home Program Activities team, starting with the Home Program Activities Program Manager, Kelly Underwood. She's here today, as well as her staff, Vicky Belanco, Selena Castilleja, Jamie Gonzalez, Paul Monson, and Tony Noya. They are home program representatives, and my name's Jay Cortez. I'm a home program senior specialist, and I'll be giving the presentation today. And Kelly, I don't know if you're here, if you want to make any comments, but if so, please feel free to come on camera or microphone. I'll give a second for that. Okay. And so we'll keep going. And so now I'd like to give Zach Ferguson a chance to say a few words.
Great. Thanks so much, Jay. And thanks to everyone who's here with us today and some time on your Tuesday afternoon. Like Janice mentioned, we're excited about this funding round for home, for all the, to have a target for tribes specifically to do a lot of different types of things, whether it's activities or actual projects, permanent construction, homebuyer assistance, to increase housing security communities throughout the state. And so I'm excited to be here with the home team, to be invited by them, the true experts here who you'll hear from today, but representing the tribal affairs team at HCD, if there's anything we can do to help facilitate just general awareness about projects that you and your community might be interested in, or actual technical assistance between yourself and the program, the home program, or anyone else at HCD, that's what we're here for. You can always reach out to us at ciap@hcd.ca.gov, and I'll drop that chat. And I'm excited for the rest of the webinar today. Thanks again, everyone, and thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Zachary. And once again, welcome. And before I forget, we preset this webinar to record for the benefit of those who couldn't attend, and even for the benefit of those who are able to attend but want to go back and watch back part or all of it. So the process there is we end up getting it posted up to YouTube and then putting it up onto our website with the slide deck. Please be patient, because that takes some processing time and there's a lot going on here, but eventually all 5 of our Home NOFA webinars will be posted up there if things technically go as planned. I should also mention before I forget that there is, a week from today, a home project activities tribal webinar, and that involves multifamily rental projects and first-time homebuyer subdivision projects. So those things are a completely separate type of activity to do than what we're going to talk about today, which is programs. So I'm glad I didn't forget to tell you that, because if you're here for the other thing, you're welcome to stay, but you definitely want to come to that webinar in a week. So let's go over what we're going to talk about today. First, about as a matter of program overview, the funding and goals, then the program requirements in 2 parts, and you can see what's covered there: eligible applicants, activities, and expenditure rates, uses of funds, underwriting, and property standards. And then we're going to end with application scoring and evaluation. And so we're going to cover what we call threshold and other minimum requirements. And then again, the 50% rule, scoring factors. And this year, we're going to give extra emphasis to what it looks like to go into eCivis, which is the application portal, and create an application and actually apply for the funds. By the way, we will be welcoming your questions in the chat, and we'll be answering those at designated question and answer times right before breaks in a couple of cases. So we are not here to keep you any longer than we need to, but we're going to take the time we need to give you everything you need so that you know about the program and know how to apply for the program. So let's keep going. So we have some NOFA deadlines. The application submittal period, which is extended for tribal entities, it's longer than for competitive applications, is what we're trying to say here. The application portal opens in 3 days, so on Friday, January 31st, and you have through September 24th, 2025 at 5 p.m. to apply under the tribal over-the-counter process. We have more slides about that in a minute, but this is the first mention of it. Okay, let's talk about the amount of money in this Notice of Funding Availability. That's what NOFA stands for. So in round numbers, we have in the whole NOFA $35 million or so, and 55% of that will end up in rental projects, 5% will end up in first-time homebuyer projects, and 40%, if there's enough demand, will end up in program activities awards. And so you can see the numbers associated with each of those. 50% of the money is to be awarded to rural areas, which is not usually a big challenge for us based on whom we tend to serve, who applies, and who scores the most points on the competitive side. And at the same time, HUD says when we issue grant funds to participating jurisdictions, such as the state of California, 15% of that has to be offered up to community housing development organizations, CHODOs for short. And so 15% of 35 million in rough terms is 5.3 million. There's a little bit of behind the scenes math about admin money. So don't get hung up on the exact math here. This is super close to where it's going to land. And so 15%, we have to satisfy these criteria simultaneously. And then 20% of this NOFA is reserved for Native American entities. That's our target. And so that works out to $7 million. And that's going to be for program activities, which is what we're talking about today, and for project activities. Again, rental and subdivision projects. So that's the pot of money that you're kind of competing for amongst other tribal entities. So that roughly $7 million is for what? It's for low-income households. And by the definition of the home final rule, that means that households that earn at or below 80% of area median income per what HUD publishes every year, and for very low-income households earning at or below 50% area median income, or even lower, or even in between. So below 80 is the takeaway there. It's also in order to increase the supply of affordable housing and to expand home ownership opportunities and improve existing housing, kind of like Zach touched on. All the apps have to be submitted through eCivis, as I mentioned earlier. And for you, that starts on Friday, although you'll have a long time to start and finish. So I don't imagine people digging in and completing applications on day one. It never happens, but that's when they'll be available to at least start looking at. And so there's a copy of the link. It'll show up in the PowerPoint that will be posted to our website. There's also a link on our website right now on the notice of funding page to that page. And on that page, you would see all of the current HCD department open NOFA solicitations. So you'll see CDBG on there right now. You will see home projects on there right now. But if you're trying to apply for home program activities, don't click on home projects. Don't click on the non-tribal home program activities. You're specifically looking for 2 solicitations, and Vicky's going to talk about this at the end of our presentation, but basically a main tribal app for program activities and a sub tribal app. In fact, multiple subs if you're applying for multiple things. So we'll get into that later, but that's just a preview of what we're going to focus on soon. We also have links to, in our resources part, I think Vicky will show you this too, to the eCivis Grants Management System user manual to kind of tell you how to get in there, create an ID, start an application and this sort of thing. And there's also even a posted prior webinar about that if you're so inclined. And so again, all these links are available on our website, and there's the URL for our web page, I should say. Okay, so let's talk about what's new this year. So I'm just going to call the 2022-23 double NOFA last year's NOFA. And then obviously today we're talking about this year's NOFA, which is the 2024 NOFA. We call it the 2024 NOFA mostly because it involves the 2024 HUD home allocation to us, the state of California. So in the last NOFA, there was a tribal entities 20% target, but it had the same application deadline as cities, counties, and developers, basically a 2-month window in which to apply. This year, we've made it so that your solicitation, your opportunity towards those $7 million, which is that 20% of the whole pot, it's over the counter. And so what that means is we're able to give you a much later application deadline this way. So specifically September 24th, that's a lot of months. But keep in mind, when the funds run out for tribal. So it is first come, first serve. You probably don't want to be last in line because we might be oversubscribed by Native American entities. So there's kind of a push-pull there. Um, the scoring factors were in the NOFA last year, and this time around, we've created a new Appendix D, and all the scoring factors have moved into there. So the NOFA is a little less bulky this way, and all the scoring things are in one document, which is convenient. NOFA Appendix D. It's posted right now on our website underneath the NOFA, and you'll find appendices A, B, C, and D there. And so another aspect is last year we brought back the bonus general administration money for tenant-based rental assistance applicants to increase from the standard 2.5% off the top to 10% off the top. But we had an overall cap. So it did come down to, we were heavily subscribed last year, and we had to actually score up everybody who applied for tenant-based rental assistance, and some people got the bonus admin, and when I say people, cities or counties, and some didn't. This year, we don't have the cap. So we're able to, you have confidence that you'll get, if you apply for 500,000, which is exactly what you must apply for, and it's all tenant-based rental assistance, $50,000 of general admin money becomes available to you for documented expenses related to interfacing with the home program, whether that's preparing apps, phone calls and meetings with us, running the program if you get a grant, and so forth. Some important things to know. So this is kind of a relatively new thing, so we decided to just highlight it one more time at least. Home buyer education training is required when you're running a first-time home buyer down payment assistance program, and it has to be done by a HUD certified housing counselor who's employed by a HUD certified housing counseling service. And there's a link to search for such providers. Good news for a lot of grantees and applicants is that you don't have to do the counseling, and that there doesn't even have to be a local counselor. It can be done remotely. And at that point, there's a lot of options. Another important point is federal single audit requirements. And so if you're an applicant and you're exempt from the single audit requirements of 2 CFR section 200.512, which basically says 750,000 or more of expenditures. It's going to go up to $1 million, I think, effective for this fiscal year, but the one we're worried about is last fiscal year. So the threshold, unless somebody wants to correct me on the team, is still 750. So if you spent more than 750 of federal funds last fiscal year, then you owe the Federal Clearinghouse a single audit. And so the idea is you need to upload it to us as evidence of that, or evidence that you're exempt and that you informed the clearinghouse that you're exempt from that requirement because of the dollar threshold. So let's get into program requirements. This is part one. So let's talk about a few important definitions in the NOFA that intersect with, and I'm not prepared to get into all the ins and outs of it. It wouldn't be the most productive use of time. It's more to notify you and those helping you of critical terms in the NOFA that kind of determine what you can do, who can apply, and this sort of thing. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to read these to you because it won't take that long, but local agency is a term. It's a city, county, or a city and county, think San Francisco, or a duly constituted governing body of an Indian reservation or rancheria, and includes any governmental agency or local public entity. So that could be a public housing agency or such. And so there's where you could look up more details at the California Health and Safety Code. And then we have another term, local public entity. So that's any city, county, or city and county, the duly constituted governing body of, you're going to see there's a lot of overlap on these, but they're not quite the same. Duly constituted governing body of an Indian reservation or rancheria, tribally designated housing entity, right, as defined in the code. I won't read those. Redevelopment agency organized per that code, or housing authority. So there's several ways to be called a local public entity, which this intersects with some of the other definitions and ways that we found to be able to make Native American entities eligible for our programs, which this only opened up to Native American entities, I think, 2 or maybe 3 NOFAs ago. Okay. Then we have kind of 3 more definitions. This one is just what is a Native American entity according to the NOFA, and then we're going to talk about 2 subsets of this. So this is straight out of the NOFA, and it says that Native American entity means an Indian tribe or a tribally designated housing entity that is any of the following. A, applicant meets the definition of Indian tribe under that section of the U.S. Code. B, applicant meets the definition of tribally designated housing entity under that code. Or C, if the applicant's not a federally recognized tribe, applicant is either 1, listed in the Bureau of Indian Affairs Office of Federal Acknowledgement petitioner list there at that rig, or an Indian tribe located in California that is on the contact list maintained by the Native American Heritage Commission for the purposes of consultation pursuant to that government code. And 3, has formed and controls a special purpose entity in compliance with. So it's 1 or 2 and 3. Notice that. Don't miss that on that slide. Okay, so there's a dual requirement if you're not under sub 1 there. So that's worth reading and digesting and understanding. And it goes without saying, I think, but I'll say it. Of course, contact us if there's any kind of concern, confusion, question, or anything regarding these terms, your eligibility for applying for certain sorts of home projects or programs. Okay. Then we have the 2 subsets that I told you we'd talk about. There's a Native American entity dash federally recognized tribe. Probably kind of self-evident what that is, but I won't read it to you, but just know the definition's there and it's in your NOFA. And then we have a second. I'm missing a slide here. We had one for non-federally recognized, so pardon me, but the opposite of that is a non-federally recognized tribe. I will say here that only federally recognized tribes, according to HUD, can apply for home program activities funds. And we have a slide later that tells the why of this, but that's why I believe that I'm hopefully speaking with people who are members of federally recognized tribes. So let's talk about one more important definition, because if you do get awarded, if you're going to apply, you need to know where you could operate a program. And we need this definition too, to make sure that we're keeping you to what would keep HUD okay with what's going on. So Native American lands means real property located within the state of California that meets the following criteria. 1, it's trust land for which the U.S. holds title to the tract or interest in trust for the benefit of 1 or more tribes or individual Indians, or is restricted Indian land for which 1 or more tribes or individual Indians holds fee title to the tract or interest, but can alienate or encumber it only with the approval of the United States. And sorry to be reading the slides, but I think it's important we all are on the same page here. In general, I won't strictly read slides. Second half of that definition, and the land may be leased for housing development and residential purposes under federal law. So that was 1, and that's long. And then or 2, lands outside the jurisdiction of tribal government owned or co-owned by a Native American entity in accordance with those California regs cited there. That's what's meant by Native American lands. So the Native American Service Area is defined in the NOFA as the area where the project is located within the Native American lands and includes lands outside of the Native American entity tribal government jurisdiction up to 100 miles. Keep that in mind, up to 100 miles from the boundary of the Native American entity trust or restricted land. As defined there, that is within non-entitlement jurisdictions. So the idea is you could operate a program that's in one of the places that could come to us and often do and apply for home funds as well. Let's say unincorporated, County of Tulare. Let's say, you could think of a city of Porterville, etc. All the places, if they're on what we call NOFA Appendix A, list of state home eligible jurisdictions, that list does two things. It defines who could come to us as a city or county to apply for state home funds, meaning they don't get them from the feds. They come to us for these federal funds. So it defines who can apply, but it also defines where your project or program could be. It's one in the same list. So please keep that in mind too. Okay. So only Native American entities, federally recognized tribe, may apply for program activities as a state recipient. That's what I was saying before. Non-federally recognized tribes may apply as only a special purpose entity developer for home funds for project activities by forming a special purpose entity. So they're going to talk about more about that on the home projects webinar. It's really not worth our time to try to get into that here because that's not our intended audience for this, because that kind of entity in that second paragraph couldn't apply for home program activities. Okay, and then it goes in there about what special purpose entities are, but it has to do with continuing control of the home project and conforming with certain requirements at the California Code of Regulations. So something to keep in mind if you intersect at all with the project side, because I realize some of you might be going to both of these webinars today and a week from today. So we're going to ask the question ourselves before anyone asks, why are only federally recognized tribes able to apply for program activities? And the answer is the home final rule at 24 CFR. By the way, that's where the whole home final rule is, 24 at the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR for short, and it's in Part 92. But now we're going to talk about part of that whole thing called Section 92.201, and it says a unit of general local government designated by a state, that's us, to receive home funds from a state is a state recipient. So we consulted with HUD and said, okay, well, what about non-federally recognized tribes, or what about federally recognized tribes? And they ruled that it would consider only a federally recognized tribe to be a unit of general local government and thus eligible as a state recipient and thus eligible to apply for program activities. So that's the kind of the why of it. So thank you for bearing with me. I know that's a little technical. Let's talk about this wonderful thing called AB 1010. So Assembly Bill 1010, which is, we've noted for you where that's found in the California statutes. It's Chapter 660 statute, or 2019, enables tribes to request that we, HCD, modify or waive state financing, statutory, regulatory, or home NOFA requirements, subject to the limitations of AB 1010 itself, and subject, of course, to applicable law and to the California Constitution. So it gives us some ability to, like it says there, modify or waive certain things that exists that our cities and counties would be 100% subject to, for example, and developers for that matter. Second paragraph. So requested modifications or waivers must be consistent with program compatibility or be an instance of avoiding an unnecessary administrative burden, and they're evaluated case by case. Thirdly, AB 1010 authority does not apply to federal statutes or regulations at all. So we can do things with state statutes, state regulations. It does not apply at all to federal statutes or regulations. Finally, if you want any assistance or support in submitting or even asking about the possibilities of an AB 1010 waiver request, contact either us, the program, starting with home NOFA at hcd.ca.gov. That's on a lot of other slides, or the California Indian Assistance Program, CAP. Zach is part of that. And Zach, would you like to say something in that regard?
Jay, thanks for the overview of AB 1010 and kind of what that looks like. And yeah, just encourage folks to reach out to us with questions and requests for assistance of any kind.
Right. It's a good tool in our toolbox. Thank you, Zach. Okay, shifting gears, let's talk about home rules. So with all home funds, which is strictly for housing, it comes with three kinds of limits. All of these are posted on HUD's webpage, but we reformat them and post them on our limits page as soon as we can after HUD issues them every year. I'd recommend ours. They're much, much easier to digest. There's three kinds of limits that apply for all home projects or programs. So one is income limits. And so HUD publishes the 80% area median income limits for each household size you could think of, from 1 to 8, and then they even have provisions for bigger than 8. Second set of limits, all home projects are, because when in programs you create little projects, right? You're helping a household. That's kind of a project within a program. So I'm going to use the word projects here. Put that filter on. So the home ownership value limits are another set. So home just figures out 95% of the median sales price for each county and publishes that each year. And that represents the maximum purchase price of a unit that you could assist with down payment assistance. It also represents the maximum after rehab value limit for someone when you're trying to help a homeowner rehab or tear down and rebuild their house. So that's two sets of limits. They have to be income eligible. Their home can't be worth more than a certain amount. Thirdly, and lastly, there's the home maximum per unit subsidy limits. And that rule just says that no more than X amount of dollars can go into any one particular home unit, whether that's an apartment unit or a single family dwelling. And so those are the three limits to be aware of. They're all published, and a little later we'll mention what the current subsidy limits are to just give you some idea. We'll keep going. So not only do we have home limits, but home is subject to federal overlays, which means federal rules, regulations, and such that impact all federally or most federally funded programs, such as home. So one is what we call NEPA. That stands for the National Environmental Policy Act. So think of the EPA. So they're kind of the driver on it, and we'll have some details in the webinar, but basically the environmental piece, making sure that the project doesn't harm the environment and that the environment is not harmful to those who are going to occupy the project. Secondly, we have procurement overlays, and they're actually found in this 2 CFR Part 200 at the bottom. But what that basically, it has rules for if you're going to hire someone competitively to run your program, you have to actually go through a process to procure them according to how they call it out in 2 CFR Part 200. If you were to instead hire a nonprofit or a city or county to run your program, you could hire them straight away, just hiring them as what we call a subrecipient. And it wouldn't be considered a procurement action. So those are just some high-level things to keep in mind. We want you to know what you're getting into if you apply for these funds. That's the whole point of doing a lot of kind of Home 101 here. It's not just focused on the NOFA. Okay, so now let's talk about the 3 different types of eligible activities that are home program activities. First one is first-time home buyer. And there's 2 flavors of that currently. One is by far the most popular, acquisition only. So basically what most people would call down payment assistance, but we'll get into some details about this in a moment. This is an overview slide, and then we'll get into some details about each of these activities. Acquisition with rehab used to be okay, but it's no longer home eligible. I believe that might change with the changing home federal home regulations that we're still kind of reviewing, and in terms of what are the changes and when are the effective dates. So it's in flux. But for now, we're working under what's been since 2013, and even before that, which is acquisition with rehab, can't be done under home, single family, that is. And then the third one is infill new construction, and we'll get into that in another slide. It's not acquisition only. It actually involves building a home on an empty lot and then assisting somebody to purchase it. Okay, the second activity besides first-time home buyer is owner-occupied rehab. We'll get into what that looks like. The name kind of gives it away, but we'll tell you a lot more in a minute. And the third opportunity is tenant-based rental assistance. And so that's just monthly rental assistance for tenants and a little bit more than that. And we'll get into those details as well. If people are familiar with Section 8 or housing choice vouchers that the federal government gives, it's a lot like that, except not as permanent. Okay. So let's get into the details of first-time home buyer acquisition only. So this is for down payment and closing cost assistance to meet the gap. What do you mean, Jay? What do you mean gap? Okay, what I mean is the whole point of first-time home buyers to get to a household to a payment that's in a certain range percentage of their income. For example, you might say, I want them to be between 25 to 35% of their income should go towards their house payment, including taxes and insurance that the mortgage company collects on their behalf and pays out on their behalf. So that defines the gap. How big a first mortgage can you get that would cause you to have a payment of that size? And then the whole idea with the home program is fill the gap, the rest of the purchase price plus the closing costs, beyond what the borrower contributes, of course. But that's what we mean by filling the gap. It's all about right-sizing the first mortgage so that we're right-sizing the first mortgage payment so that they can afford it and it's sustainable for them and not stressful. Okay. So that's what we mean by debt to income ratios. And it's going to be minimum this, maximum of that, and kind of hitting that. We even have a tool to help you do the math by just plugging in all the factors, their income, the home sales price, etc. Okay. The home must be standard when they buy it, so it cannot have any health and safety or code issues at closing. And so if there's something that needs attention, the seller is going to have to pay for it and get it fixed before the buyer is allowed to be assisted with the home. They can't pay for it before they own the home, and they can't pay for it after they own the home or have the work done after they own the home. That would be acquisition with rehab, which is not allowed. Fourthly, assistance amount must not exceed the home maximum per unit subsidy limits. So I promised you I would give you an idea of what those limits are currently. So for a 2-bedroom, it's a little over 250,000 right now. This changes about every year, year and a half, depending on what HUD's up to. For a 3-bedroom, it's a little over 327,000, and for a 4-bedroom, a little over 359. So the subsidy limits in most places don't tend to be a problem in the world of program activities. Where they can get challenging is on maybe a rental new construction project where they need a lot of money per unit to build a unit. So anyway, it's something to keep in mind. And we also key something I'll tell you about later off of those subsidy limits. Namely, we're going to talk about 25% of these figures when we're talking about owner-occupied rehab grants. Lastly, the home price can't exceed the home ownership value limits, as we mentioned before in the limits, the slide that was dedicated just to the limits. But just reminding you, those come into play here. Of course, the income limits do and the subsidy limits do as well. Now, the variety of first-time home buyer that's not just down payment assistance is called infill new construction. And again, it's building out homes within built-out neighborhoods. It's not extending the edges of town. Okay, it's filling in gaps between other residences. It has to be on scattered sites. No more than 4 dwellings could be within 2,000 feet because of that the environmental regulations. So that's not too hard to achieve because you're running a program, not a project. You don't know who's going to show up and where they want to live. And then finally, the application must document that there's available grant funds or building sites owned by the applicant you if the cost will exceed the appraised value. In other words, we don't provide a development subsidy. And the experience has been very few apply for this, presumably because A, it's kind of hard, and B, it might be hard to get it to pencil out. It's hard to build a home for, it might cost 300,000 to build it, and it might be worth, 250,000 or less, or 200,000 after you build it. Okay, now we're going to go to the second home program activity, owner occupied rehab. So as it says, got to be something that's currently owner occupied, not it's going to be owner occupied. No, currently owner occupied. It must be their primary residence currently and after rehab. And it must start out as a substandard home, or else it doesn't qualify for this activities. This is not a remodel program. So starts out as substandard, so that means it has at least one or more substantive health and safety or code violations. Not just a water heater strap missing, not just the lack of a carbon monoxide detector or a smoke detector. We're talking beyond that. Okay. So it has to start out as substandard, but it has to be standard at project completion for it to be home eligible. And usually that's not a problem. Usually things have multiple problems and they need oftentimes tens of thousands of dollars to fix them, whether we're talking about roofs or air conditioners or all kinds of things you could think of, siding. Okay. When one of those projects is being done, the general property improvements part is limited to 15% of costs. So this is talking about things that you couldn't say are weatherization or health and safety or code, but rather, oh, well, while we're at it, let's put in a fresh, set of carpet, even though the carpet wasn't torn, a trip and fall hazard or anything. We just want new carpet or a fresh coat of paint on the walls or fresh kitchen cabinets that otherwise didn't have issues. They just look dated. Those are general property improvements, and they're controlled to 15% of the overall job costs, counting the borrower's contributions if they make any. So it's not a home improvement program. The last bullet is that we have a thing called the home test for reconstruction form. And basically the idea is if your program determines it's cheaper to tear down and rebuild a property than to rehabilitate it, then we require you to take certain steps and submit certain paperwork to demonstrate with photos that it's, make your case. It is cheaper based on this, this, and this. See, here's our estimate for this, and here's our estimate for that, and here's our photos, and it's cheaper. We'll approve it. So you just have to prove it, and we want to document our files. Last but not least, tenant-based rental assistance, TBRA for short. So the idea here is they are rental subsidies to help people beyond 30% of household monthly income, which is what they must pay out towards their housing. So there's two versions of this actually. What we call the certificate model, which I'm going to recommend, which is much simpler. The math is simpler, everything's simpler, or a voucher model, which means they could realize savings if they get into something cheaper, or they could upgrade and pay more than 30%. Don't recommend it, but we can talk about it. So it's rental subsidies to help them have affordable monthly rent. It can also be security deposit assistance. You just give them the money up to 2 times in California. 2 times the rent is the maximum in most cases. So you can give them that money. And you could also provide utility deposit assistance, but not alone. So it'd have to be with one or both of the other two things on this slide to also help with utility deposits, which I don't see a lot of that coming through on our reports. So in this program, the rent plus the utility allowance can't exceed what's called the rent standard that you set. That's definitely true for the certificate model, which is the one I recommend. If you're under voucher, there's some exceptions to that about they could upgrade a little, but so you're going to put in your tenant-based rental assistance program guidelines, because you'll always start with our set, fill in the blanks, make a couple choices, submit it, your program rep will approve it. You're going to show your proposed rent standards. And those in turn could be set between 90 and 110% of HUD's published fair market rents that they update every year. So just giving you the concept. Sorry, somebody's calling me on Teams. I got to reject the call. Okay. Anyway, so that you get the idea that it's not anything goes on the approvable rents or units. There are definite caps to that, so it cannot be anything, looking like luxury housing versus your market. Finally, unlike the other two activities that can serve everybody up to 80% area median income, this activity must serve people at 60% of area median income or below for at least 9 out of 10 households you serve. The other 10% you serve could be between 60 and 80% area median income. So this one is reaching a little lower into the income strata than the other two activities. More about tenant-based rental assistance. Just know what you're getting into. This has some extra kind of administrative burden on it. So you have to take steps to document rent reasonableness, much like an appraiser would document what a home's worth that somebody wants to purchase. So it's doing comparables. You must perform a housing quality standards inspection and clear the unit. Of course, with the other two activities, you also have to inspect the unit. You must use adjusted monthly income. You have to calculate that. There's a good HUD calculator that'll get you there pretty easily based on disability and childcare and what have you, and senior. So you're going to still calculate monthly gross income regarding that income limit, but you're going to do adjusted monthly income, and that will be the basis for how much monthly assistance they'll get. Finally, on this slide, you do have to recertify income annually for a household if you're agreeing to serve them more than 12 months. And whenever you're informed that income changes by a certain percent, I think it's 10% or 20% change, you'll also have to recertify income. And the point is redoing the calculations between how much is the tenant household paying per month and how much is the program. What's the gap the program's filling? Because this is another gap program. You're helping them pay what they can't afford to pay monthly, just like with a first mortgage payment. All right, a little bit more. Your commitment to a household cannot exceed 24 months, but you could renew it for another 12 or 24 months. But the initial commitment, each commitment cannot exceed 2 years. And though you must offer at least 12 months as a minimum, it could end up being as little as a 6-month agreement if for some reason they want less than a 12-month commitment from the program to them. Thirdly, when you do this program, no matter what other rental riders or paperwork agreements you're doing, you must execute a lease addendum for the protection of the tenant to supplement their actual lease. And their lease, by the way, would have to start or be renewed as of the day that you're starting to assist them with monthly help. So a lease addendum, and also what's called a VAWA, which is Violence Against Women Act addendum. And that's another aspect for tenant protection. So just again, I want you to know what's entailed administratively when you're trying to help people with monthly rents. And you'll also execute written agreements with both the landlord and with the tenant. Okay. Shifting gears, now we're out of the 3 activities and we're almost at a question and answer time and then a break time. So let's talk about funding limits. I'm checking my watch. Thank you for bearing with me for nearly 50 minutes here. The minimum and maximum application amount for new home program activities applicants for Native American entities is $500,000. That's because only those who have had recent home program activities awards and have spent well could actually apply for more. So everybody else could apply for no more and no less than 500,000. And that 500,000 includes the administration and project-related soft costs. And as I mentioned, we take general admin off the top of, calculated off of 2.5% of that if it's not tenant-based rental assistance, 10% of that if you're applying for tenant-based rental assistance. Here we are. We're at the questions thing, and I haven't been able to keep my eye on the chat, so I wonder if somebody can help me out and tell me if there's any questions in the chat for us to talk about.
Jay, there are no questions that I can see in the chat, and there are no questions in the question section.
Wow. Okay, well
Oh,
then
somebody
everybody's
does
either
have-
asleep or I'm doing
We
a
do have
decent
an
job.
attendee with a raised hand. Well, they raised their hand and then they put it down.
Okay, I would like to ask, well, I can't remember if conventionally, we don't like do, unmute and have people verbalize things. Usually we just ask them to type things in the chat. So should we keep it that way?
It's fine if they unmute and ask their
Okay.
question.
Okay, can one of you please unmute Candace then? I'll also take a stab at it. I'm not a Zoom guru, so I do the best I can. Candace, we're working on it. Bear with us. We don't live in Zoom every day by any means. We live in Microsoft Teams every day. So bear with us while we try to unmute.
While you're trying to do that,
Yeah.
it says chat is disabled.
Oh,
And there's
really?
yes, and there's another comment in question and answers now. I missed part of the webinar, so I may have missed this, but this is a loan program.
Oh, yeah, so there's a couple levels on which we could answer that, right? We you will loan money to first-time home buyers. You will loan money to people who own their home, with a few exceptions. You can grant them. We're going to talk soon about situations in which you can grant money out, and for tenants, you grant money to them. If you're asking about if this is loans or grants from us to the awardees, it's basically a line of credit. And so we give you money to be able to, if you're going to, you front the funds, you help the first-time home buyer with the down payment assistance, and then you submit to us for reimbursement, and we reimburse you with those funds. So from that standpoint, it's a grant program. We're granting you the money to loan out. It's just that you get the money reimbursed from us after the fact on a reimbursement basis. Nikki, do you have anything to add to that?
I do.
Okay.
I can say that the requirements that all of our assistance is provided as a loan for a home buyer or a owner-occupied rehabilitation project is in the state regs. It is not in the federal regs. And so this is a component that can be a topic for an AB 1010 waiver, so that the tribe can actually design a program that meets the tribe's needs. And if the AB 1010 waiver is approved, the assistance you provide can be in the form of a performing grant, because there are periods of affordability that have to be met with the funding. And so we can talk about that at length in a technical session with you individually, but there is an opportunity to use your AB 1010 waiver to waive the requirement that all first-time homebuyer assistance and owner-occupied rehab assistance is in the form of a grant.
Was that the question from the person who raised their hand, or?
No. So there's now another question in here, and it says, my question is, you say first come, first serve. So she's talking about the over-the-counter process. Are the awards approved immediately upon receipt as first come, first served, or is there a specific date that you wait for a decision and an award of funds? So can you describe the over-the-counter process for the attendees?
Well, Nikki, you're on a roll. Do you want to keep going?
I certainly can.
Okay.
So in the over-the-counter process, you can submit your application and the department can work back and forth with you to get it complete and ready for an award recommendation. At the time that it's ready for an award recommendation, we'll present it, and if there's funds available, we will present your request to the internal loan committee and make an award. Keep in mind that in this NOFA, $7 million, 40% of that is set aside for program activities. And so during the over-the-counter period, we will not award that 40% to projects until after the over-the-counter period closes, or until all 40% has been requested and awarded to tribal applicants to operate program activities. I hope that answers your question. If not, I'm going ahead and please ask for clarifying information.
Okay. So, and Nikki, I'm looking at my interface here and I see one for chat, but I don't see one for Q&A in my, as a host, interface. So I'm sorry that I can't see any questions that are coming in Q&A.
I can. In the chat, there is a comment from JC. I don't know who that is, but it says that Janice told me that will award any and all tribal, whether projects or programs. Each NOFA application will have its own kind of cap until after the over-the-counter closes, because we have to reserve funding for program activities during the period of the over-the-counter. After that time, if the over-the-counter funds are not utilized for program activities, we may very well turn around and provide those to fund a project.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. All right, well, whoops. So here we are at break time, and to make it easy to remember, I'm going to do a nice round. See you in 8 minutes or 7.5 minutes or whatever at 2:40. I'm going to start at 2:40 sharp. Thank you so much. Okay, we have a couple more minutes left till 2:40. Okay, it's 2:40, and as promised, we're gonna keep going. Remember to put your questions along the way in the Q&A that apparently exists that I can't see, but Nikki's monitoring it. Okay, so let's talk about program requirements part 2. Involves use of funds, forms of assistance, and underwriting, property standards. So, what are eligible uses of funds for first-time home buyer if you get an award for that? Well, they include a loan as gap financing, as we discussed, behind a 30-year plus fixed rate primary mortgage loan only. So it has to be a very straightforward kind of 30-year fixed, and it could be 33 or 38 years if it's USDA sponsored or funded. But there has to be a primary mortgage, and it can't be us. We just fill the gap as a second or even third mortgage lender, depending on what else is there for financing. It can also pay for project-related soft costs, what we used to call activity delivery costs, or ADC for short. Okay, and those are up to 6.5% of the borrower assistance amount, and that's for documented expenses that you document, tracking your time and expenses, which staffer did what for which household on what day, and for how long. That level of tracking, and then eventually you can charge that at the full load cost of the person involved. Soft costs when it comes to infill new construction could be up to 6.5% of the total development costs. Purchasing the land and building a home, if you didn't own the land, it's not geared towards what you assisted the home buyer with. But again, it's been a while since we've seen anybody apply for infill new construction. All right, for owner-occupied rehab, eligible uses of funds are loan or grant funds to borrowers for rehab or reconstruction of substandard homes. So we talked about that. And for this activity, your project-related soft costs can be up to 24% of the home loan or grant amount. It was 6.5% for first-time home buyer. It's up to 24% for this activity because it's more labor intensive to go do inspections and work write-ups and contractor bid openings and helping the homeowner hire a contractor of their choice and doing interim inspections along the way, and making potentially multiple progress payments to contractors. So it's just more administratively intense. And again, you must have clear time and expense documentation whenever you're going to claim any federal funds, actually. And finally, for tenant-based rental assistance, eligible uses of those funds are, of course, grant funds to tenants for monthly rental assistance. Also, maybe for security deposits, if you choose to make that part of your program, or some tenants need it and some don't. And for utility deposits. And by the way, if you're assisting a tenant in place who's already there and they don't need a security deposit, but they will need to have a new lease, kind of reset the lease with the landlord. But then you're going to have other people who are going to get onto your program and then go find a place that you approve, and they're I'm sure there will be a security deposit, and they might not want to empty their savings or decrease their savings to do that. Okay, and then the project-related soft costs for tenant-based rental assistance are up to 5%. But the way HUD made the final rule, and again, we'll see if this changes when they implement and better explain their new home final rule, federal home regs. For now, it's limited to income certification, time and expense, and unit inspection, not for all the other things you would do, many of which I mentioned in an earlier slide. So those things you'd have to, that's kind of why we're paying you bonus general admin or making it available to you when you apply, is because we recognize 5% probably doesn't get you as far as you need to, especially if you're going to outsource this work and maybe hire TDHE or the housing authority of the local housing authority to run your TBRA program for you. Okay, then there's general admin funds. And so again, 2.5% off the top of your home award, plus a bonus of 7.5% more for TBRA funds off the top of the part of your home application that related to TBRA. And again, for all documented time and expenses for home program and project admin, beyond the available project-related soft costs. That's what admin is for, is everything except what you're able to collect from your activity funds as activity soft costs, up to those limits. But if those limits aren't high enough, you can kind of supplement that with general admin funds. But general admin is also for things not tied to successful projects, because you're going to deal with a lot of people and it won't work out, and it's only fair if we can reimburse you for the time you spent trying to work with somebody. Ineligible uses of funds. Okay, you can't refinance existing debt with the home funds. You can't pay for expenses incurred after the final expenditure deadline in your standard agreement that you would get from us. You can't pay delinquent property taxes with it, or overdue insurance, I should have put on this slide. And you cannot pay for expenses incurred prior to the execution of your standard agreement if you get an award, except environmental, unless we pre-approved it. So that's a conversation for another day. If you get awarded, we can talk about that last bullet point. So let's talk about home loans. So if you're going to make a home loan, according to the state home regulations, which are still in effect, the loan has to be made at 0 to 3% simple interest, not compounding interest, but simple interest. And it must be fully deferred, which means it's not amortized. There's no payments for the life of the loan to a home buyer or a homeowner. So that's the current rules. Could change with when we switch over to home guidelines instead of state home regulations, which would be a number of months from now easily before that could happen. Let's talk about home grants. So we just talked about loaning people money, but under tenant-based rental assistance, when we say grants here, it's in the sense of you're giving people money, you're not loaning people money. So tenant-based rental assistance, there's no loans involved. You're just giving them money to help them. Relocation payments are to be paid as grants. Lead-based paint related items are to be paid, drawn from us as grants, and it's never loaned to people to pay for lead-based paint things. But let's talk about home grants for owner-occupied rehab, because now it gets a little interesting. So in owner-occupied rehab, if somebody has a home and it's worth X amount of dollars and they have a first mortgage and they have some equity right now, and you're going to do a rehab, and now, they're going to have even more equity because the home will be worth more. So our program says in the home program regulations, state regs, that you have to loan them all to the new equity that they have. Until they're at what we call 100% combined loan to value, which is simply saying that their existing first mortgage, pretend they only have a first, and your home fully deferred silent, what they call a silent second with no payments for usually 30 years, combined, if they can equal the value of the house, but not more. There's an exception to that too, which I'll talk about in a minute. But Beyond that, you're able to give them, so the word we use is grant, a rehab grant. You can give them the rest of the rehab money as long as it doesn't exceed 25% of that home maximum per unit subsidy limit. Earlier, I showed you the subsidy limits were in the lower mid twos up to at least the mid 300,000s. So 25% of, let's split the difference, 300,000 is 75,000 worth of money you could grant to them if they needed that grant because they had no more equity in their home. Back to the first point, it said maximum 100% combined loan to value. That's true unless somebody has a first mortgage and it's bigger than even what the home's going to be worth after you rehab it. So they're kind of upside down, as they say. At that point, you would grant them all of the home rehab money as long as the second bullet, you didn't exceed 25% of the subsidy limit. I try to point to things and it changes slides. I'm sorry about that. So that's, again, don't want to get too much in the weeds, but give you a sense of the power of this program to help people with loans and even grants when grants are triggered by lack of equity. And if you're going to grant people money because of lack of equity, it's like that test for reconstruction, tear down and replace. It's another thing where you have to get our advance permission. And a lot of times we'll get a request from someone to, hey, yeah, we got to tear it down and replace it. And hey, we need to grant them some money because they won't have enough equity. So we get like a double request to approve both of those things. They kind of go somewhat hand in hand. For infill new construction, we're just going to whiz through this because, again, very unpopular activity. But if you were to do it, your underwriting analysis has to include all of these items that I'm not even going to read to you, but just be aware there's a slide that talks about and summarizes what those requirements are if you're going to go down that unusual road of infill new construction. In addition, it talks about the property standards. So for infill, it's what you would expect out of doing new building things. For rehab, so we're talking about owner-occupied rehab, of course, you have to establish rehab standards. So when we replace roofs, if it's going to be a composition shingle, to replace a composition shingle, what grade is that? How many years worth? Is it dimensional, et cetera? So what grade of carpet? That's what we mean by rehab standards as much as anything. And then there's this thing in the HUD final rule called major systems. And major systems are something that basically it's heating, air conditioning, plumbing systems, electrical systems, and things like this, and even siding that HUD says in the final rule, they have to have a 5-year remaining service life to them when you inspect and evaluate. And if you feel they don't, you must repair or replace so that they will have an expected useful life of at least 5 years. Okay, so that's got to do with property standards for rehab. For down payment assistance, if you're just helping someone, the house has to, like I said earlier, not have any health and safety or code issues. It might become a different conversation, and I think we need to talk about it with you. So on non-trust land, that's true. The kind of ground we need to break together would be, what does that look like if it's on a reservation or on a rancheria or tribal trust land? So we're not going to pre-address that, but we're happy to take it up as soon as we need to with you. But for tenant-based rental assistance, it's got to meet this, again, housing quality standards, same as they use for Section 8. It's very, very health and safety oriented. For manufactured housing, if you get into that, if you're going to tear down and rebuild because it's cheaper, so reconstruction, it requires a permanent foundation and utility hookups. It has to be connected to a permanent foundation. Okay, and it has to have utility hookups. Can't just be plugged in. For a rehab of manufactured housing, the foundation and anchoring have to meet state and local codes. And the lease period for manufactured housing has to be at least equal to the affordability period on purchases. So home has this thing called the affordability period that Nikki McKay mentioned earlier, and that's the federal period of affordability which in our world applies to just first-time home buyer projects, including acquisition only, which is probably what you would apply for. And if you assist someone with, this is going to go up just a little bit soon, but for now, if you assist them for 40,000 or more worth of assistance, you're going to have that maximum affordability period involved, which is 15 years. And the effect of that is that there's an owner occupancy primary residence requirement upon the occupant for those 15 years. And if they violate that and move out, it triggers a due and payable on their fully deferred loan. Or if we ever get to the point of amortized loans, trigger repayment of the loan by them. So to have a manufactured home, let's say it's in a mobile home park, I'm uncertain how it would work about a lease period of at least, let's say, 15 years. I just don't know if that happens in the real world, but that's the requirement, at least under the current federal home regulations. We are in a little flux right now where there's some changes and we're getting a read on those, but it's in process. Okay, now we're on the environmental review slide. So again, it's called NEPA, National Environmental Policy Act. It's at 24 CFR Part 58 is the part that applies to what you do. And the whole idea here is no funds may be committed to a home funded project before the completion of the environmental review for each household served, tenant, homeowner, home buyer for that project. So again, it's not a programmatic thing. You can't just do one form and say, we're all good for our tenant-based rental assistance program. No, you have to do one for each tenant because it relates to things like, airports and things that vary, floodplains and various things are always to be considered, and you can't do that without an address. For general admin, you can do a programmatic form that says, this is exempt, it's just admin, but you have to do one of those forms once at the outset of your program as well. And that's all because of that applying to federal activities such as home. So we're at another juncture where you could ask a question in the Q&As. And Nikki, do we have any right now?
Sorry, I was on mute.
Oh, sure.
So yes, we do have a couple of questions in the questions. The first one is, what if they have equity but can't really afford a second mortgage? Do they qualify?
Yeah, great question. So here's the answer. It's worth reiterating. So we don't allow amortized loans. So for first-time home buyers and also for owner occupants, when you give them that second mortgage, there's no payments on it. It doesn't affect their monthly outflow. It's just a debt, and what some people call a balloon loan, and so it's a loan that we loan you this now. It may or may not accrue interest because we might set the interest rate at 0, or it might be the maximum 3%, but someday you're going to owe us the principal plus any interest that's accrued. Yes, you can make voluntary payments along the way, but that's the beauty of this. And the power of this is it's not affecting their monthly outflow for owner occupants. Everything stays the same for them. They just keep paying their first mortgage, and now they've got, a loan from you with no payments for hopefully 30 years. So it's not a problem.
Okay, and the second question in our question section is, for the purposes of this grant, do you accept tribal certification for proof of ownership? We have a number of FEMA trailers on the rancheria that need rehabilitation or replacement, but they do not have conventional deeds.
Nikki, I'd be happy to let you field that one because I've not thought about that question before.
So this is a new scenario that we have not encountered before, but I would look at it similar to whoever owns the actual trailers. If FEMA is the one that owned the trailers, did they did they transfer the ownership to the tribe? And if they did, then we would probably treat these I'm assuming these trailers are rental trailers. But we would have to follow the ownership. Oh no, they're not rentals. So has the ownership of the actual FEMA trailer been transferred into the tribal member's name? They don't need to have a conventional deed. They just need to have the registration. And if that's the case, we can treat that like any other mobile home replacement that we do in our cities and counties, where a trailer is in a mobile home park and they rent the space. And so I think there's a way to get around that, as long as they have some type of registration in the name of the homeowner that wants to do the rehab. That's my best guess at an answer. It may not be totally accurate, but that is the approach I would take.
Thank you, Nikki.
And then here's a follow-up question about, but eventually they have to pay it back to the tribe, right? And I'm going to just follow up and remind folks that we are talking as if the tribe has not elected to submit an AB 1010 waiver. If a tribe submits an AB 1010 waiver to remove the loan component from their activities, the answer is going to be different. But for this presentation, we present it like our current regulations stand. And your AB 1010 waiver is going to change that answer.
Thank you.
And then, okay, that's the end of the questions.
All right. Then we'll just continue.
Oh, wait, there's
That's
a
fine.
comment from Lisa Campbell in
Yeah.
the chat that says that we could do an AB 1010 for registration issues. And I'm not necessarily sure, because HUD requires proof of ownership. So, but we can talk about that on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Oh, some more questions? Will a copy of this presentation be available? And the answer is yes. We will be posting it on our website.
Correct.
And the last one, here's the question. Okay, so if we submit an AB 1010 waiver, what is the answer to the question about the loan? If you submit an AB 1010 waiver to operate your programs as grant dollars, it will be a performing, I'm assuming it's going to be a performing grant, because they have to occupy, for first-time home buyer, they have to occupy the property as their primary residence for a specific number of years. And if they fail to do that, then we have to pay back HUD. For tenant-based rental assistance and for owner-occupied rehabilitation that currently has no period of affordability, and you did a grant, then there would be no payback by the recipient of the funds.
Right. Although I guess, Nikki, couldn't they make it a conditional grant? Like, hey,
I don't think they want to. I don't think they want to. I think that the tribes want to operate on grants as much as possible, so that the tribal members don't have to repay anything. But it again depends on how they put together their program, and they're going to have a lot of flexibility with an AB 1010 waiver.
Okay. Then is that it for the Q&As for now?
I believe that is it for the Q&A, and Willa says we'll need to look further into this question, but I'm not sure which question. I think it's about the registration and ownership piece.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Hi, thanks. Yeah, I just was saying, it sounds like there are a lot of specific questions that we might need to look into before, we give definitive answers. But I did want to clarify in terms of AB 1010 requests, that just submitting an AB 1010 request does not mean that it's approved. There is an approval process. So Nikki's answer applies to if an AB 1010 waiver is submitted and approved.
Thank you, Willa.
Yeah, and if you
Thank you.
guys, if the people attending this look back at the slideshow, they'll see, language very much to that effect that there's a process and there's some stipulations and things like that about the AB 1010 possibilities and the waiver or modification request process. It's not just automatic or one size fits all or anything like that. But I'm glad we do have that tool in the toolbox because it opens a lot of possibilities. Okay, here we go. So now we're going to get into application review. So we have this thing called, I don't even think it's in the state home regs threshold, but it says minimum requirements. We call it threshold. So it means that regardless of the score, let's say you were competing on score, like all the cities and counties will be once again, and you're not. So somebody might have a decent score they can put together and compete that way, but we don't even get to the scoring stage with applicants who don't meet these criteria. For example, the application, if it wasn't received by the deadline, well then your application is not going to be considered. Okay. And again, we'll talk later about you have to submit an extra piece of an application per program activity you're applying for, because if I didn't mention it, you can apply for 1, 2, or all 3 home program activities with your 500,000. Might pay to focus on 1 just because administratively that's easier than trying to ramp up or learn or run 2 activities, let alone 3. So for those who don't have experience with things, I would start out and just dip my little toe in the water and just start with 1 activity, the one that seems most pressing, or at most 2, especially if you don't have a lot of similar experience from other funding sources for that activity, like down payment assistance or rehabs, single family rehabs. So you have to have your application in on time. You have to be an eligible applicant. We talked about that earlier. For this webinar we're doing today, we're talking about federally recognized tribes. For the projects 1 in a week, we're not necessarily talking about federally recognized tribes. Okay, and eligible from the cities and counties standpoint would be, are they on our Appendix A list of state home eligible jurisdictions? Because if any way, shape, or form they're getting home money from HUD, they're not an eligible applicant with us. Neither are individuals. Sorry. It has to be an eligible activity you're applying for, and I think it would be hard to apply for something that's not eligible. It has to be an eligible use of funds. Again, the way our applications are built out in eCivis and on our application forms that you'll upload and fill out. I'm sorry, I said it backwards. Download from eCivis, you'll fill them out, you'll upload them with the upload button in certain parts of the application in eCivis. It's going to keep you within the guardrails, and it will be an eligible activity, I'm sure, and it will be an eligible use of funds. I don't have worries about that. Your application also has to be complete. And again, we did a pretty good job of trying to safeguard that so that it's impossible to do otherwise. Okay. And then you also cannot have any unresolved audit findings according to the state home regulations. You have to at least be in process and cooperative with the auditing entity. Is kind of what that means. And then you have to be compliant with the submittal requirements of 2 CFR 200-512. So we talked about that a little earlier. We're either going to get a copy of your exemption letter, or we're going to get a copy of your latest single audit or evidence that one is underway. something like that. But there will be an upload place to upload whatever you can give us with this, in regards to this. And you can't be on the federal list of debarred contractors. I think it's still at sam.gov, sam.gov. We'll be checking for that after we receive applications to make sure nobody's applying who's been debarred federally. Really rare. Couple other requirements. You have to request between the minimum and maximum, but it is 500,000 for all of you because, to my knowledge, well, I'm certain none of you have any state home program activities grants. We've never issued one to a tribal entity. So you will be applying for 500. Don't apply, please don't try to apply for any different amount. And the application forms can't have been modified. So let's talk about scoring. So scoring won't happen for tribal entities, won't happen unless we get oversubscribed on that $7 million for tribal. At which point, if you go into overflow, competitive with the cities and counties and such, then the scoring will matter. So that's why we're going to go ahead and cover scoring factors today, is because it could come to that if the tribal 20% target, 7 million, if we get oversubscribed, as it were, for Native American entities. Okay, so 950 points are possible, and it's broken down kind of as follows. So tribes will get 50 points because you're not subject to having a current local housing element, but cities and counties could lose their 50 points if they're not compliant. If you're in a rural community, as evidenced on our rural form that you will find in eCivis in the files area, and again, it's based not necessarily where you are. If the location of your activity is going to be, within 100 miles, like we talked about, or such, maybe it's rural, maybe it's not. But if you prove that your program, or in a week, and you're talking about rental projects, if that project is in a rural, hard word to say, area, you'll get 50 points. Otherwise, you won't. Then there are 100 points possible for applicant experience, and that would be experience administering not just home, but also other qualified affordable housing or community development programs over the last 7 years, plus year to date, 25, by the time the apps are due. And so we have kind of two pieces of that. One is for same experience. So if you're applying for first-time home buyer, can you demonstrate that you've done at least 7 years worth of 2+ units of that type of thing to get max points, 80. And then we have another category, another form called other experience, where you say, okay, I'm applying for first-time home buyer. I'm going to list on my other projects or rental assistance projects or whatever, anything except down payment assistance would belong on that other form. And that's worth a maximum of 20 points on that. So I didn't list out the details here, but that's what's underneath that 100 points. Okay, and then we also look at prior performance. You will get no points deducted because I think we have 1 or 2 actually Native American entities who might have had a home, let's say, projects contract in the past. And to the extent they owed us annual performance reports, if any were missed or late, points would be deducted to a maximum of 50 points. Same with quarterly program income statements that could also get triggered by a home projects contract that you have. So that would be few, if any of you, in terms of the potential for losing points based on reporting. But this should kind of remind you that if you get an award, the importance of keeping up on your reporting is that then if you want to hopefully apply again and get some more money and stay in business with us over the next decade, like several cities and counties have, the way to do that and get more points and be more certain of getting awarded when you apply is to keep on top of your reporting. So that's kind of our little our carrot to incentivize reporting is to attach points to it. If you have non-compliance with monitoring or contract requirements in the last 5 years, we could deduct up to 100 points. Pretty rare. I've seen it a couple times, so I really couldn't imagine this would apply to any of you. And then we have a lot of the points here out of the 950, 250 of them are based on this NOFA Appendix C, which you will see on our website behind the NOFA and Appendices A and B. There's a link to it, and it's an Excel spreadsheet, and it's got a lot of tabs, and it would be possible if you were so inclined, and I don't know if I'd recommend it, to go in there and say which one would yield the most points and the highest score. I'm thinking if you can apply fairly timely for this and get some of that 7 million that's carved out for Native American entities while the money's there, then maybe the points at that point won't come into play. Plus, it's always best to just apply for what you really need and not just apply for what would get you the most points. I'd hate to see you apply for TBRA if really what you needed was rehab in your community or your service area. So some more criteria. There's up to 75 points if you're applying for first-time home buyer. We're going to have you fill out a chart to prove that it would be feasible, how many affordable housing units sold in the last 12 months, kind of like a ratio between what you're trying to do and what percent of the market you'd have to capture to do it. So on that one, there's a form to fill out, whereas on the other two, these come off of the what I just taught, that 250 point thing, Appendix C. We just kind of grab these numbers for you off of the census data is what that really is, or American Community Survey data. That's what's on that form. So no forms for you to fill out for the points for this one, but for first-time home buyer, there's a form for you to fill out. And then this is the easiest points of all. Everybody gets 25 points if they just simply fill out the form. They'll be prompted to download, check the box, sign it, upload it, and it basically says, yes, we understand that if we get awarded, you're going to give us your latest and greatest program guidelines for each and every activity for which we applied, and we're going to start there. They're locked into track changes, and then we can see what changes you had to make and what changes you wanted to make, and we'll approve them or work back and forth with you till we have approved guidelines. But this form just is your acknowledgement, knowing that you got to start with our set. Okay, and then there are 90 points available for those. This doesn't include any of you for sure, but higher expenditure rates on recent program activities contracts. I point at myself because I've been in program activities for 18 years now. But for the last 3 we had that had a chance to spend were the 2016 NOFA, 17, 18 NOFA, and 19 NOFA. And so for any grantees who are applying now who spent 75+% of those collective awards, they probably only had one of those 3 years, maybe 2. If they spent really well, they're going to get 90 bonus points, and they'll be able to apply for more money. If they spent kind of well, then they'll get 60 bonus points, and they'll be able to get a medium amount of money, okay? More than 500, but not the million. So that's kind of how that looks. There's just stated ranges here for good, what we call good recent spenders, and we mean for state home program activities contracts. It's very limited. I think this is the last piece. So the last scoring factor, which is worth pretty substantial 110 points, is there's 3 ways to get this. One is just to apply for tenant-based rental assistance. Number 2 is your proposed program activity. So it's either first-time home buyer or owner-occupied rehab, if it's not TBRA. If you're going to certify that you're going to serve 50% or more of your people who are experiencing homelessness or at risk, or you certify that you'll primarily serve extremely low-income families, which don't exceed, by definition, 30% of area median income, If you certify one of those last two things, or if you apply for TBRA, that's 3 different ways to get those 110 points. And with that, it's time for questions before I turn it over to Vicky Belanco, who is going to show you what you need to know, a decent amount of what you need to know about applying in eCivis. Do we have anything, Nikki?
Okay, Jay, there's one question, and it's been in here for a while.
Okay.
They would like you to repeat what you said about the required audits we need to submit.
Okay. Not my, as far as I know, and I haven't recently researched this, but my recollection, and I would love for somebody to correct me if they know differently, is that tribal entities, if they are collecting federal funds, and then if they expended 750,000 or more in a given fiscal year, which is on, from July 1st through June 30th, by March 31st of the following year, after that June 30th, they owe the federal clearinghouse a copy of a single audit report, or they owe them something to say we didn't spend 750 or more federal funds, we're exempt from this. So I would love if somebody would jump in and tell me if I'm remembering wrong or misunderstanding. That's my understanding of it. Maybe, and maybe one of the attendees, it's very possible you can educate us here with comments in the Q&As about this. So I apologize for not having a definitive answer. So
I believe what you said
yes,
is correct, Jay, for non-tribal entities. I think the question is there some other law or rule that would apply to tribes differently?
Sure. Well, the reason I said what I said is that my recollection of this discussion was it was the idea, okay, they are subject to the same thing as cities and counties, and some other entities, by the way, school districts and what have you. But I think the discussion was, but unlike the cities and counties, they don't owe the state controller's office of California. They don't need to include them in the communication or inform them of what's going on. That's my recollection, which left me with the impression that, but they still owe for the federal, to communicate with the federal clearinghouse. And that's what stuck with me, because if it had been like, no, this doesn't apply to them, that would have stuck with me too. So that's what's kind of stuck in my brain right now. And I apologize for not having anticipated this question. So I guess I'll say, if
there is a comment, Jay, in the question and answer. That sounds correct. We are currently behind on our audits, but are working to be in compliance. And they do have to submit to the federal clearinghouse. I do not believe that they have to submit to the state controller's office.
That's my belief too. So I guess we can land this on, if you're subject to it, then you're subject to that being an eligibility factor. So if it came down to it, and let's say you applied, and let's say you didn't give any evidence of single audit status or submittal or exemption, we would double check and make sure that that was a requirement to which you're subject. And if so, that would make all the difference. So proceed with caution, make sure you know the truth about that, and please be in compliance. It always saddens me whenever we have a grantee apply and for some reason they don't pass threshold. Single audit has been a reason for that in the past. So, okay. So are there any other Q&As out there, Nikki, before I have one slide to show you before I turn it over to Vicki.
There is one more comment from Lisa Campbell that says if a project is on Native American land, then the HOSDA has specific limits on the audits to be submitted. And so again, it's different for our tribal partners than it is for some of our other partners. And so we'll have to check applicability at the time.
That's the best answer. Yep. Okay, well, let's move on through and we'll be able to let you out quite a bit earlier than the advertised time of 4:30 ending. We won't be done at 3:30. Don't get excited, but we'll be done, I think, well before 4 o'clock. So let's keep going. I have one more slide and then I'm going to turn it over to Vicki Belanco, one of our 5 home reps. So her topic is e-Civis application portal, and I just wanted to put it into the slideshow so that you could reference it. That many struggled last year with our new, for the first time, we went with a structure in e-Civis, basically a dual solicitation called main and sub. So the concept there is we used to do this, the applications on paper, and we had what was called Part A, and that was kind of the umbrella overarching things that you had to answer. And then underneath that, everybody knew, and it was easy when it was on paper, fill out one of these Part Bs of the application for each activity you're applying for. So who's your program team for first-time homebuyer? Great. And what's your experience with first-time homebuyer? Great. Okay, now for owner-occupied rehab, you're also applying for that. Answer all the same questions, but for a different activity. So that's the same concept with main and sub. Okay, main represents Part A from the old days, and sub represents Part B. So the thing to remember is everybody's got to first complete a main application. So you will see a solicitation that says tribal program activities, or it won't say tribal, it will say Native American entities, program activities, and it'll say main in all caps. And so you're going to start there and fill that out and get all the overarching umbrella things done, including your budget. And then you're going to go in and open up a sub application, fill out at least one, because you're going to apply for at least one of the 3 program activities. But then you're going to fill out another sub for that second program activity if you're doing a second, and so forth, up to 3 subs, but a minimum of 1. So Vicki's going to try to show you something on that today. So the main takeaway for you is everybody must complete 1 main in e-Civis and a sub for each activity being applied for. That's what that second bullet says. And many failed to submit any sub applications last year. But it wasn't competitive, so we were able to, let them go back and do it. Had it been a competitive round, the ones who didn't submit a sub would have lost out on threshold for an incomplete app. So that was fixable, but we don't want to go through that dance again this year. So we felt that we had a training gap as trainers to not have really emphasized that. So here we are emphasizing it. So example, not to overkill it, but I'll overkill it. Applying for first-time homebuyer and OOR, you submit 3 applications. First the main, then a sub for first-time homebuyer, and then a sub application for OOR. That's it. So Vicki, would you kindly take it away?
Oh, yeah. If I can find the screen. Can you see that?
Not yet. Yeah, click on share. I'll do stop share if that might, maybe that'll help. Hey, there we go.
Good.
Yep.
Okay. So, hello, I'm Vicki from the home programs team. I'm just going to do a small overview on e-Civis. I want to actually go over a few things Jay did, since my team likes to make fun of me. I'm very visual, and so it just makes it easier on certain things. So this is our home home website, and it has all the information. He had that in the slide, but I want to change the URL in the chat just so everybody has. HCD does a really good job updating stuff. So sometimes, like, I've been here for 4 years, and it seems like every year, we try to get more technical and make our website easier. So just in case that link doesn't ever work, sometimes it's easy to go from the main and just go, grants funding to programs that are active to the home. And like I said, this is a good resource because it has everything. So here, when we're talking about the NOFA, it has the NOFA information. This home emailing list is good for you to get information, kind of like you guys received on the webinar, but it's also good to sign up just for other things going on. I know with new staff, sometimes we don't have, people drop off and then new people come on, but it's always good to be like in the know of what's going on. Here's the PDF for the NOFA, so if you want to download it. This will get you the link to go to the eCivis where the applications are, which if you click on it, it'll go here. So currently right now, we just have the non-tribal listed, but by the January 31st, we'll have 2 additional ones that we'll have. It pretty much will just be called 2024 NOFA Program Activity Tribal. And you'll have 2 of them, like I said, here. Like he talked about Maine and stuff.
Hey, Vicki. Hate to interrupt, but there's a big block with your name on it, at least on my screen, that's sort of obscuring where you're trying to point. So I was going to ask you to just scroll just a hair so that they could better see what you're pointing to in terms of the eCivis page. So if you go back to that second tab, yeah, if you could scroll a little there. And so what's up now are our non-tribal. And see, there's a main and there's a sub.
Yeah. And then when you click on, like I said, you'll go to the main first. And this will be really nice because this will, like he was saying about the files, you'll go to the files and then this is kind of like a list of all the files. So if you wanted, you can just download, whatever makes it easy for you guys, just to download so you can look at the files separately. So you have them while you're going through the application when you're looking. Let's see. And then pretty much, I'll show you how to log in for the first time to eCivis. If you have any issues finding the app, I'll show you too. When you go in there, sometimes you have problems finding, the application. But if you ever have doubt, then just go back here and then just click on the apply, and it'll take you directly into the perfect part of the eCivis program. It'll take you basically into here more. Where so sometimes if you're a first user to this, you'll see just basically this, like it won't have anything listed. You can search it, but it might not pop up the NOFA 2024. So basically, you'll have to go here and apply this way, and then I'll let you kind of where it logs you in. Okay, and then but a few things before. Here's what I'm talking about. So if he was talking about, this is good for just so if you need to research more, the federal regulations, the state regulations, and when he was talking about the income.
She's on the resources tab, you see.
Yeah, it has a link right here. So when he was talking about looking up the income limits and stuff, because before sometimes it used to be confusing for myself. So I just know sometimes it's, like I said, we do a good job trying to keep stuff organized and updating the website. But if you had a link, let's say saved 2 years ago, or even a year ago, maybe it might not work. So you get kind of flustered trying to find stuff. And then here's where we're going to have, when he talked about the eCivis webinar that they have, and there's a user manual here. So you need more information. They have screenshots. It's kind of a good resource there. But those are where you find those. I think that was mainly it. And then this is just helpful for just once you start working on the program, some of the items you need. Okay, so for eCivis, so if you never use eCivis, you just really seriously just type in eCivis portal login. When you go there, I think already logged in. Log out. So it's going to take you here. And then you basically, if you've logged in before, you can go. Sometimes it's kind of particular. So sometimes even if you know your password, sometimes it will act like you forgot your password. So you can do the forgot password, or you can just go to create an account. And it's pretty easy. It just, first name, all the good stuff. Then you will sign up. Now this is a little fun part. It will not, it doesn't allow you just to sign in right away. You will get an email. I'm so visual. You will get an email like this, and it'll say, and the fun fact here is it might take up to an hour. Mine came really fast, but sometimes I think the system has its moments. So you have to wait for this to confirm your email account, and then it'll let you log in for the first time. I think a few times for the last few years, we had people complaining they couldn't log in right away because you have to receive an email first, accept it to get in, and then you can log in. Let's see. Okay, and so once you get in, like I said, you'll create a profile. Get as detailed as you want on this. Probably good to be detailed. And then you just update the profile. You see the little green checklist will say, it's saved. How this works is pretty much like the home page is just going to basically my application. Like I said, you're probably not going to see it. You'll probably, like when I first logged into it, I didn't see anything. It was kind of like this. And I was like, what's going on? But if you go here and you don't see it, again, you got to go here and apply this way. And it'll take you to the folks have to log in again, and it'll take you in there. So here, when you're going to see, let's see, I think I have another screenshot for this. So pretty much when you log in, you'll see like, okay, this is the main page, it's going to want you to do the profile. That'll pretty much be like the start of the application for the main page. At least on this one. But just so you know, so the budget's kind of hidden in here, and that's what I guess we really wanted to talk about. Is like if you scroll down, the budget's below. Kind of like hidden in these little sections. Then we'll just go into the application. Things that on this one I filled out. The portal login. So this one, like, it's going to be a little different, I believe, for the non-tribal, just because I think we're having it. This one is kind of, the profile has a lot that it asks you, but it's kind of the same stuff, just ask for your name, UEI, IN, some of the addresses, who's the, different information in here. And then you just save changes. And then on the main one, it might be The one you see might have two, kind of like part A of the application and part B. This one just has one right now. And then you'll just go through it. It'll just, like I said, we'll ask you for some stuff. Like Jay mentioned, I think most of you probably will not have any current grants or old grants. So it'll just be 0, 0. And then we ask different steps to see where we have the select to upload the file. So again, from those files that you download to your desktop and you fill out, then you'll just, and this will take you to actually the link to the file area. So in case you can't find the files, if you click on those hyperlinks, it'll take you to the list of files. And I think that's pretty much it. Do you want me to say anything else, Jay?
Thanks, Vicky. So I would say that I want to make it clear that what Vicky, can you go back like a screen or two to where we were seeing the tiles underneath, for that one?
You want to fill out one of these too for you. Hold on.
Everybody needs to get used to the fact that this system's going to incessantly make you keep doing logins, okay? So
what's funny is sometimes it works so nice and it keeps you logged in, and then some days it's like every time you go to one page, it makes you log back in.
Yeah.
So just remember it's that portal.
Okay, so once you complete your profile, then and only then will you see those tiles, and those 3 tiles represent, correct me if I'm wrong, Vicky, but I believe 3 parts to the main application. This is not to be confused with the sub, because look at the top of this screen in gray, main. It's the main one. So all these forms are about filling out the main application.
And
you
so
will go back to that list on that main screen of all the HCD grants that are open right now, and you'll click on sub, and you're going to kind of have to rinse and repeat everything she's showing you here to do one sub. And then if you're applying for 2 things, you're going to have to go back and do so again for the second sub. So this doesn't represent the main and the sub all rolled into one here, right, Vicky?
correct, yeah. So
This is just the main.
This one's just the main, but the reason I had 3 is because I was still trying to play with it myself.
Okay.
So it should only have one.
Okay.
And then it'll show if there was 2 parts of it, like part A and part B, it would just have like 2 little same like this, but just down here. And it just tell you to open them separately like this. And then once you're done, you can approve it and then move on. But it should just be on one tile. But then here's so like I said, so this, and that you have to have this complete. So you just go, like I said, below, and you do edit budget. So this is the tricky part. So depending on what program you want, I was doing it this way, but let's say we're going to do first time home buyer, and we're going to do 500,000.
Yeah, so don't miss the fact that the numbers you saw pop up there in the gray boxes before she clicked on one first time home buyer, you can't click in those, you can't fill those out. You have to open up the section that you want to edit. Everyone will do general admin, and everybody will do at least one of those 3 activities above it. But to populate the correct fields, you have to open that section. And we do have instructions on a form that you're going to be using called application amount calculator. It's an Excel spreadsheet which helps, like especially cities and counties, know how much they can apply for based on recent good spending. So yeah, Vicky, if you want to open that up real quick, it's the application amount calculator, and it's got some screenshots, and it tells you exactly what to do in that budget about which of those fields to fill out, and you get to ignore many of the other ones. Wrong form. Yeah, that application amount calculator.
Is it on?
It's right there. It's the 5th one down from the top. Yeah. Yeah, so this form, we knew there was a necessity to kind of do some show and tell here. I don't know if it'll show up okay in this format, but um, trust me, it's some built-in technical assistance about, okay, this thing will subtract out the 2.5% admin from your overall amount for that activity, or 10% for TBRA, and it'll tell you how much is in each bucket. And then it tells you where and how to go fill out the budget in eCivis based on this form. So please just realize the linkage between this form um, and the eCivis budget. Okay, this will be your what you need. So yeah, we don't need to beat it to death, but it's important that you know that you got to fill out this form for one amount calculator, but also because it contains explicit instructions for filling out the eCivis budget, which is
Yeah.
just about the hardest part of eCivis.
Yeah, and so this is the nice part about this is just, the total activity, say, you're doing the whole first time home buyer is 500,000. So you just put the 500,000, it'll show you the math that,
Yeah.
1,500 will be for admin, and then 400 and something will be for the actual grant fund. So, and then here he put extra stuff to, you forget how to utilize the budget in the system, because it is kind of funny, let's say. So he kind of goes through it here. So going back to the budget. So like I said, it right away, at least my eyes too will go in, like I want to click to try to open these. But you have to go into each one. So like I said, you just go to the blue section and under cost, and just do what was I did the math, but I think it's 4.
So I think that's a great job, Vicky. Is that everything?
I think that was it pretty much. I just wanted to do that. And then general admin, it has to be separate.
Yeah, and you're getting those numbers off of that Excel spreadsheet that you first did. And it feeds you the numbers, and it tells you this number in this column or this cell goes over there, so just please make sure these agree and are synced up.
So I did them. I'm not a mathematician, no, but
yeah, I think we were just putting some wrong numbers in wrong boxes, so it wouldn't.
I know, math wrong, but hold on. Let me see.
Yeah, it would be 487.5 and 12.5 is the split if you don't have TBRA. But yeah, that's how that works. So,
yeah, so then you just go all the way to the bottom and just hit save. And that's all you need.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then you'll need to take that form he was talking about and upload it into the.
And like Nikki said, because this is a over-the-counter NOFA, we're in the unique, for us, position of being able to help you guys along the way before, during, and after your submission and all that, because it's not competitive. So you can lean on us all you need to get this done properly or fixed. What we're interested in is we want to, blaze a new trail here and have some Native American entities try some program activities, and hopefully with success.
Okay, that's it.
Great job, Vicky. Nikki, are there any questions in the Q&A?
Yes, there is one question in the question box. It says the program calendar says the over-the-counter applications will start being accepted January 25th. But if I remember correctly, that was pushed back due to the LA fires. Is that correct? If so, what is the revised timeline?
As far as I recall, it was always advertised as January 31st, but regardless, currently it's January 31st. And the application deadline remains September 24th. And one thing I should have called out earlier is, it's you have till that date to apply under the tribal of 20% target. However, essentially, yes, your application deadline is September 24th, but it is first come, first served. Those $7 million could run out, and you could find yourself competing on points with everybody else if you're not one of the first $7 million of Native American awards. Okay, and then we still, I think, have to have a little, this is kind of a new frontier for us too in terms of over the counter and this. So I'd say we still have a little bit to discuss internally about, all the ifs, ands, or buts, but it's along those lines that all things equal, you'd like to be one of the ones, who claimed part of that 7 million before others did. But it's a lot longer timeline than the competitive application. Although theirs got extended from March 24th to May 24th because of the SoCal fires disaster. And we had a lot of, people who'd be preparing apps or what have you, who just had their hands too full with those things to maybe attend a NOFA webinar, let alone fill out an app and do all the things that, oh boy, on project side, there's a lot to putting together an app and all the, documents you have to provide to do a rental new construction project, for example. So, the department figured out they needed more time and gave them some more time. That's all I have. This slide says, and it's true, we're very happy to meet anytime on Teams, anytime before applications are due. And as always, email homenofa@hcd.ca.gov to request a call to schedule a technical assistance consultation, or to ask any other question or anything like that. It's that's where you want to email, all things NOFA. And so that just reiterates, that's our email address. And this is Kelly Underwood's the home program manager. There's her phone number. It'll be on the slides. That'll be posted on our website. There's her email address. For all of us, it's just first name dot last name at hcd.ca.gov. So that's everything, unless there's any residual questions lingering out there, Nikki.
It looks like they're asking if you could repeat the email again, or maybe drop
sure.
it in the chat.
Sure. Home NOFA, HOMENOFA at HCD, obviously Housing and Community Development, .ca, State of California, .gov. And every single listserv you see from us, I think without exception, has that email address linked as well. So we value your time. We appreciate your time, and we are crossing our fingers hard that we get a surprising amount of program activities applications. We would love the opportunity to explore it with you. Early on, you might say, we're thinking of applying. We have a lot of questions. Okay, let's talk. Or we're applying and we're struggling with something. Can you help us? Sure. So we're on your side. We're here to help you. And again, we're eager to break new ground and get some awards out for program activities to Native American entities and see some good things happen. Well, thank you, everybody. We were able to give you back more than 30 minutes of the time that we claimed we would take from you. So thank you for your time and attention, and look forward to the next one of these, maybe a year from now or so. But thank you again. I will attempt to stop the recording.